the Caribbean should remain a zone of peace. Thanks to the prime ministers and leaders of Dominica, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, St. Kitts and Nevis, Antigua and Barbuda, the Bahamas and Barbados, Cuba and Grenada, for reinforcing the peaceful character of the Caribbean Sea. However, Prime Minister Kamla Persad of Trinidad and Tobago disagrees, as she is actively seeking war against Venezuela. Her treatment of Venezuelans is aggressive, as she is portraying the Venezuelan nationality as a bunch of murderers and drug traffickers. Kamla Persad claims that high crime rates in Trinidad and Tobago are the responsibility of Venezuelans. And she claims that all drugs that come into Trinidad and Tobago is also caused by Venezuelans. Such xenophobia is unacceptable, especially in a sister country that was part of Venezuela during the Spanish Crown. Kamla Persad claims that illegal immigration does not fully assimilate to the culture of Trinidad and Tobago, while Trinidad and Tobago and Venezuelan culture are similar, as we were both part of the Spanish Empire. It was just recently that England took over Trinidad and Tobago from Spain. Furthermore, Kamla Persad facilitates extrajudicial killings of Venezuelan fishermen on speedboats by the United States military, instead of producing her own defensive forces, appropriate for counter-narcotics. Kamla Persad's escalation of the Caribbean potential war is unacceptable, and Venezuela has the right to defend ourselves, as it is becoming increasingly clear that a United States invasion could be facilitated by Trinidad and Tobago, considering that next Monday, Kamla Persad and Marco Rubio will speak at the Department of State in Washington. And as we all know, Marco Rubio is a terrible Secretary of State whose only topic is to promote war against Venezuela, while he couldn't care less about the rest of the planet, as seen in his deficient dealings in Ukraine, Russia, Israel, Gaza, Qatar, and everywhere else on the planet where war continues non-stop. Venezuelan military is taking precautionary measures to fortify our Iranian boats and missiles on Isla de Patos, which is Venezuelan sovereign territory close to the maritime border with Trinidad and Tobago. And Venezuela must fortify our maritime border with Trinidad and Tobago, as it is a likely spot for United States invasion, as facilitated by Prime Minister Kamla Persad. Venezuela also holds military borders close to Pedernales in Delta Amacuro State, somewhat close to the city of Icacos in southern Trinidad. Both Boca de Dragón and Boca de Serpiente are straits dividing Venezuela from Trinidad and Tobago, and the area must be extensively fortified against foreign invasion of Trinidad and Tobago as a proxy of the United States, which, as we know, is not part of the CARICOM and is not a Caribbean power. Furthermore, this has not reached consensus with the rest of the CARICOM, which would prefer the Caribbean to be a land of peace. It is refreshing to see that the Cooperative Republic of Guyana is acting cautiously, although it has been noticed that Marco Rubio and Irfan Ali spoke during the United Nations meeting. Anyone who speaks to Marco Rubio is automatically a candidate of possible aggression against Venezuela, as we know that Marco Rubio only desire is to invade Venezuela, as he has nothing else to do or to think about. It is frustrating that the United States was supposed to be a world superpower and has now been downgraded in petty discrepancies between Hispanics. Venezuela's fortification of our maritime borders started a few weeks ago across western Venezuela, including the Andes, Catatumbo, Guajira Peninsula, and Paraguaná Peninsula, which has been well patrolled by the Dutch Royal Navy at Aruba, Curaçao, and Bonaire with the permission of Venezuelan authorities. However, our eastern front right now becomes crucial, especially due to Prime Minister of Trinidad and Tobago, Kamla Persad, escalation and calls for war against Venezuela. Venezuela wishes to remain peaceful, but Venezuela must protect its territory and sovereignty, which means that our beach and island patrolling, aircraft, navy, missiles, and drones made in China, made in Russia, and made in Iran, and made in Venezuela are operational and ready for combat if we are invaded due to Kamla Persad's escalation. If Venezuela is invaded from Trinidad and Tobago, the Venezuelan Minister of Defense has warned that Venezuela will retaliate in self-defense. Venezuela has no need and has no wish to invade Trinidad and Tobago, a country with which we have until recently had excellent relationship, as known in recent Dragon oil field negotiations with Shell Oil Company, but Kamla Persad wants to escalate war. And if she allows invasion into Venezuela, Venezuela will have to fight itself, and this could become a full-fledged war, because it would not only be the United States, but also Russia, China, and Iran, all of which have significant military presence in Venezuela already. A glimpse of hope comes from the speculation that the recent calling of United States military chiefs from across the world have been summoned in Virginia, suggesting that something is not going well in the United States Army, as this is the first time in many decades that they do this kind of call. Perhaps they would like to withdraw their boats from Venezuela in order to redeploy resources to their numerous fronts in the Middle East, Alaska, and the NATO, or Taiwan, Or perhaps the United States is surrendering all their capabilities in the Eastern Hemisphere just to concentrate all their forces to invade Venezuela. In all of these cases, this is World War III. We must call for peace. There are United States personalities who would prefer to only have chirurgical attacks without American casualties. The problem is that there will be American casualties and there will be Venezuelan casualties, because this is just going to be a full-blooded war if they start an invasion attempt or if they throw a drone or a missile. And Venezuela also has the right to require, through international law and international courts of justice, any kind of monetary reparations for any infrastructure that will be destroyed. And any person who writes for war in social media right now will be recorded and accused as a criminal of war, because this war is being called through false grounds. It is unacceptable to equate Venezuela as a gigantic drug cartel. Venezuelans have all sorts of trades, professions, and capabilities, and we are not just a bunch of murderers and drug dealers. United States drug problem domestically is horrible, and they are not doing anything about that. It has been very unfortunate to see that the United States military is invading the city of Portland in Oregon, because they have said that Antifa is a criminal organization. And they claim that they will bomb anywhere in Venezuela which is part of a drug cartel. And we don't know which drug cartel are they talking about. We don't know what kinds of labs they are talking about. Everything is fake news. The only thing that is not fake is their desire to perform acts of war, drawing blood from both Americans, Venezuelans, and maybe Trinidad and Tobagoans. Trinidad and Tobago authorities are urged to de-escalate and engage in constructive dialogue with Venezuela's legitimate government of President Nicolas Maduro about immigration, drug traffic, and oil development. It has been brought to our attention that Trinidad oil industry is not doing well. It has lost market share, and the same has happened to Venezuela because of sanctions. And it is not likely that any United States multinational will save Trinidad and Tobago economically. However, Venezuela deserves respect. Prime Minister Kamla Persad has offended ordinary Venezuelans, calling us drug dealers and murderers. And she has also offended the Caribbean, as every single country in the region seeks peace. There is a word of caution about the Prime Minister of Jamaica, whose speech at the United Nations was ambiguous. Prime Minister of Jamaica claims that he agrees with United States drug counter-narcotics activities. However, they should follow international law and they should not produce civilian casualties, which is obviously not happening. So it is unclear what is the position of the Prime Minister of Jamaica. Maybe he wishes not to be seen as hawkish as Prime Minister Kamla of Trinidad and Tobago, but he is definitely not going along with the great majority of the peaceful Caribbean community. Cuba's speech at the United Nations explained many misunderstandings that many people have. Until recently, I supported every single United States propaganda against Cuba, as the embargo culture promoted by exclusion of Cuba of Organization of American States has been deeply ingrained in ordinary Venezuelans. Then came the new alternative CELAC countries that exclude the United States and Canada to concentrate on Central America, South America, and the Caribbean, where Cuba has a role in equality with the rest of the region's countries. And CELAC is now urged by Cuba to take a definite stand against war from the United States in our peaceful Latin American and Caribbean countries. Cuba has been known for having a great diplomacy, and it has been followed by Venezuela, which has continued during the last few days, observing many more meetings with countries of Asia and Africa on common grounds such as climate change, Palestine statehood, and Caribbean peace. Colombia's President Gustavo Petro continues making headlines as he participated in a Palestine protest in New York City, asking United States soldiers to disobey orders that would induce them to kill humanity. And his United States visa was revoked. President Gustavo Petro is probably the most acclaimed leader in the entire planet in this particular point of time, which is a great asset for Venezuela, as Venezuela and Colombia are determined to unify our militaries against United States aggression, which means that we should be able to rebuild Gran Colombia, which, as we know, also included Essequibo, Panama, and Ecuador. And probably Trinidad and Tobago would be closely involved, as it was also part of the Spanish crown, and it was a historically significant territory for the benefit of all inhabitants of the Southern Caribbean and Northern South America. We expect many soul-searching in both Trinidad and Tobago and Guyana, as it will become increasingly difficult for them to keep isolated, supporting the Nazi regime of the United States. We are about to enter a third world war where the Nazis are United States and Israel and the allied forces that will defeat fascism are countries led by BRICS: Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Ethiopia, United Arab Emirates, and Egypt, as well as their allies in the movement of non-aligned countries, which is of course the vast majority of the planet. We shall produce a Salvation Army together at the request of President of Colombia, Gustavo Petro, which will be deployed in Palestine and in saving the Caribbean from being invaded by the United States as it seeks the Venezuelan, Trinidadian, and Guyanese resources. United States is welcome to develop their oil industry in their shale deposits. However, if that is insufficient for their high consumption, they might have to import oil from other countries, paying an adequate price. However, what they do is to sanction Iran, Russia, and Venezuela to keep the price of oil artificially high. During the next few weeks, while we wait if the United States will finally bomb or invade Venezuela through Trinidad and Tobago, during the meantime, we will see how the attention will shift to definition of monetary and financial activities away from the United States dollar, as doing business with the United States is out of the question for a substantial portion of the international community, which is satiated of sanctions and treason. Cryptocurrencies or trade in Chinese yuan, Indian rupees, will probably be very attractive. India in particular is set to be a significant player in solving the Caribbean problems because Trinidad and Tobago and Guyana have many persons of Indian descent, and Venezuela and India enjoy a great petroleum and cultural relationship. So India is perfectly suited to promote peace in the Caribbean as a neutral party, and perhaps India's successes in solving Caribbean troubles will help it solve their problems with Pakistan. I saw with great sorrow how India and Pakistan fought against each other in the United Nations General Assembly. Both India and Pakistan are dear members of the international community, and they should solve their problems peacefully, and perhaps they should consider a negotiating table addressed in the Caribbean, as Caribbean countries will be happy to mediate between Pakistan and India, which are both great loved countries. Because we should not be enemies, as we are all threatened by United States tariffs and United States military bases. United Nations has proven to be an important place for discussing issues, and most proposals are sound. However, it needs to change headquarters out of New York City, because United States dominance by providing visas or revoking visas at their own discretion without regards to international peace efforts is unacceptable. The world has 193 countries, and most people don't have adequate information about most of such countries. I have tried to hear as many speeches as I could, but still my understanding of the world is limited, as I have not had time to hear 193 speeches. And many of the problems that were addressed were repeated, as most countries have the same problems which are not addressed by the United Nations due to its current structure. Hopefully, through regional organizations such as CARICOM and CELAC, we will be able to promote peace in the Caribbean and deter United States war, as the death of our citizens should not be an excuse for an artificial uplift of the United States economy, which is in stagflation, high inflation and high unemployment. Trinidad and Tobago is a beautiful country. A lot of its population has a good understanding of the meaning of peace and war. Venezuelans have no option but to defend our Isla de Patos and Pedernales coastlines, And we hope that deterrence will be guaranteed by showing our military might to deter United States from invading. It seems that they will invade within a few weeks, or at least that is what United States mainstream media are offering. It is crucial that Irfan Ali and Kamla Persad and Nicolas Maduro hold a trilateral meeting for the peace of the Caribbean and the world. Supporters of Irfan Ali and Kamla Persad should realize that they may be accomplices of initiating Third World War if they do not address concerns provided ad nauseam from Venezuela. A great intervention from the Prime Minister of Grenada stated that Guyana and Venezuela, as well as Belize and Guatemala, could solve their border disputes through dialogue and education. Through this channel, we have made repeated calls to discuss the Essequibo dispute with Guyana, but unfortunately, Guyana population, for the most part, do not wish to discuss the issue, as they are not interested in learning about the Venezuelan side, and our country is dismissed as a bunch of drug traffickers and murderers, just as Kamla Persad from Trinidad and Tobago is doing now. It is necessary that CARICOM meets and develops a unified strategy for saving the peaceful heritage of the Caribbean, which seems will be lost forever, as Venezuela will continue seeking Chinese, Iranian, and Russian armed forces and navy, as well as an improved Venezuelan military. Even North Korea is willing to help Venezuela as well, to offer alternative protection to whatever was provided by the United States, which is clearly insufficient and can lead to treason, just as happened recently in Qatar. Today is Saturday, and President Maduro has asked Venezuelan militias to be trained in catastrophe reactions, such as what to do in earthquakes, as we had an earthquake a few days ago, first aid, and other activities related to the plight our civilian population will endure once the United States decides to bomb us or to throw drones into us in order to kill civilians, just as Israel does and just as the United States did to our innocent fishermen not too many weeks ago. Venezuela wishes to remain peaceful, but we cannot allow foreign invasion to occur. And that must be understood by Trinidad and Tobago and Guyana, whose leadership must dialogue with their CARICOM and CELAC neighbors.